Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of, yes, you guessed it, Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11. And I think I mentioned it last episode, but similar topic. I was asked, am I going to play the US or the USSR? And the answer was sort of yes, regarding but here's sort of the future roadmap or the plans. They are subject to change. These are not promises. These are not set in stone. It's all subject to change. So don't get mad if it changes. After this series, and for generally going ahead, and this may look fairly long term, and especially you younger people, long term seems awfully far away. But generally speaking, we're going to go Germany, then another country, then back to Germany, then another country. I notice my views go much higher, so the more of the audience is pleased when I play Germany. I do believe if I just played Germany over and over and over again, that would get stale too. But so we will keep coming back to Germany. So the next planned series is back to Germany. After that, and remember these series are going to be 100 or more episodes, 100 or more days long, is sort of the U.S. campaign as planned. Will I play the USSR? Last episode, it was not entirely a rant, because there was a lot of gameplay still, but I was ranting about good old Stalin. You know, is there really a big enough audience out there to have me rant on about the Soviet Union like I did that in probably more than half of the episodes? You know, I don't know, literally an hour every day, and we never get anywhere, you know. 200 episodes in, we're still in 1936 because all I've been doing is ranting about the Soviet Union and not playing. Obviously, no, it wouldn't be quite that bad, but it would probably be pretty ugly. So, and I know, you know, like my friends Lawless, hi, and others out there, you have positive feelings towards socialists and communists, some of you. I think communism is evil. So, ultimate socialism, I believe, is evil. I believe it is as evil as, or more evil than Nazism. Do I think you are evil for believing in it? No, I think you bought into a bad idea, and I even think Karl Marx was hampered by his you know, I've read a bunch of Marx. I don't think I've ever finished one of his books, so you know, and that was 30 plus years ago. So, and I know you say read Noam Chomsky. Well, to me, he's just a fabulous, and I have no idea of wanting to read him. So I'm sorry if I mischaracterize some of this stuff. And you know, if I'm conflating Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and others with Marx's original work, it all sort of mushes in my head together. So trying to separate out there. But I really think Marx was, shall we say, maybe slightly different than the original, suffering from the Malthusian trap. The Malthusian trap, at least one sort of version of it, you know, is Malthus. He thought that at some point there was going to be too many people on the planet for you know, to be able to be fed, and we were going to have wars over food. And so this was going to be a problem. So you needed population limitations, and we'll use a modern word, for sustainability. Okay. And this is based on food. History, post-Malthus, shows this to be entirely false. the United States, I do believe, and I'm not the greatest agricultural expert, could feed the world quite readily. Just the United States. We could, without doing some super heroic effort, we could just put our farms into good active use and feed the world. Now, of course, there's more food made outside of the world, outside of the United States, than in. And so, with modern farming techniques, and we can look at Israel for some of that, what they've been able to do in their relatively dry environment, shows us that we can have massive amounts of food being made. Not too long ago, a year or more, but not too long ago, remember reading some article about, I guess you would call it aquaculture, and in sort of two elements. One was sort of fish farming, not fishing as in drift nets and fishing poles and trying. I mean, the idea of out in in the ocean having pens that do interact with the ocean, but that you put fish in them and they get bigger, fatter, and are not eaten by other fish, because the way they're handled. That you could have lots more fish generation. Plus, just if you're talking basic level food, growing plant type elements, seaweed. I sort of hate to use that term, but that is edible and nutritious out of the ocean as well. I know in Japan some of the sushi does have a seaweed wrap. And so that there are, that we are barely scratching the surface of, and this is, and again I'm using the term sustainability. And I'm not against the idea of sustainability, because I don't know if there is a, because there's massive amounts of iron in our planet deep down, but most of that is, in a practical sense, unreachable. I really don't know if, in a practical sense, if iron is a finite source that we're going to have access to, but obviously in a, at least on the planet, in a real sense, there's only so much iron. I mean, yeah, okay. But I don't know if we're ever really going to be able to use all the iron or all the copper up. But iron and copper are, to the best of my understanding, infinitely recyclable. So, it's not that you're going to ever use the iron up. It just becomes worthy to recycle it at some point, maybe. And I do know that using various fishing techniques, especially in the Mediterranean, they've overfished. The idea of big tuna in the Mediterranean is rarer and rarer and rarer. They've overfished it. So you can overutilize the source. And in the western part of the United States, in, say, 1880, it looked like we had an endless amount of trees to cut down forever. Well, we do if we manage it right, because the anti-logging people are correct in that we shouldn't be clear-cutting the forests. They're incorrect in that we shouldn't be logging. We should be logging. We should be managing the forests. And we can see the California fires situation can happen, even with human management of forests, but are incredibly increased the likelihood of very bad fires. Because like one person posted a photo from some of the recent California fires in which it showed a bunch of trees that were green and a house and sort of area burnt down right in the middle. And what it is that if it's done right, the ground cover, shall we say, which could be pine needles and could be small bushes, and that kind of thing, will burn, but the trees themselves won't burn, or won't die. They may get a black layer on them and then sprout come the next rains and not die. But if you have too much fuel, too much dead stuff that isn't cleaned out, isn't managed, too thick of whatever, that you can get it too hot that it will burn the whole tree up. That's how 200-300-year-old redwoods have survived, because they've survived through multiple forest fires through their forests over those hundreds of years before man ever, well, at least Western man ever showed up. And so, yeah, forests can be managed and logged sustainably with replanting and regrowth and leaving a percentage of the trees so that it's not clear cut, and it goes from a dense forest to a not so dense forest. With a not dense forest, you know what happens when you have a not dense forest, meaning just a few trees scattered around? Trees grow really fast, because when a dense forest happens and a tree seed falls out of the tree and goes down to the ground and germinates and becomes a small little tree, it gets no sunlight. Okay, because all of the branches above it from all the other trees are interwoven, and it won't get sunlight. So it either stays small and stunted in growth, or just eventually, dies or gets eaten or whatever it is, or burned up in a forest fire that's, on the ground. But if you clear out, I don't know, 70-80% of the trees, maybe leave a few dense patches for, deer and other animals to sort of hide out in, but clear out most of it, and then replant that area, and not replant it too dense, but plant it in a, reasonable denseness pattern. I say that because I'm familiar with Scotland, and where they plant the trees too dense because they're growing them for short term, often for paper mill use, so they don't get very big. But so you plant the trees out there, and instead of looking, this tree was 300 years old, it took 300 years to get there. Yeah, that's because it got so big and then it stops growing because of competition from other trees, and so it slowly gets bigger. But if you clear them out, they will, in tree terms, maybe not in human terms, but in tree terms, shoot right back up. So it may, instead of taking 300 years, it may take 30 years or something. Again, I know I have the details wrong here, but so human use of the planet, Malthus thought, because he was looking at the 19th century with only minor changes to it, thought that all this stuff was finite. And so this is the world in which Marx was writing in, and did not see economies as a saw an economy as a pie, and that you're cutting it up for each person, as opposed to the idea that growing the pie simply bigger, so that if one person has a huge piece of pie, it doesn't matter, because the pie can just get bigger and 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 bigger. And so it doesn't, inequality is not a bad thing, and it is that the idea that somebody has more, or somebody has a super sports car that costs $10 million versus somebody driving a cheap clunker like I do, that they have that car doesn't hurt me in any sort of way. And it is just a jealousy thing that we want to deny them. I mean, it's one thing to, I don't know, envy's also sort of thought, but I don't mean in a negative sense. It's one thing to wish to have what somebody else has, but it's another thing to, because you don't have it, want to deny it to them. And that's where I think a lot of modern Marxist, socialist views are looking. So I think Marx was wrong in his understanding of economies and how they can grow and how they are not a finite thing. Talking to a friend who has relatives still living in very remote, very primitive Mexico, and visiting them, and people living without electricity, way up in the hills is where they live, and they choose to live that way. because that is what they know. And this is sort of who he was telling me some about this stuff. And they have words, and I forget the word, for people who have left. You know, he said, you know, the Mexican word. I don't know if it's strictly a Spanish word, because Mexican, especially if you get into some of that stuff, you get other influences into the language than simply Spanish. And so these people are farming in, and they don't hardly ever go to town, and they don't go buy anything in stores, or, you know, I mean, it's like a couple times a year type of thing that they go get down off the mountain to go into the local town to buy, I don't know, cloth or something. And so they are living a subsistence style life, and that is the type of people that have an attraction to communism, because when Mexico, which we can argue about generally about the state of Mexico, but then there's lots of things to discuss about Mexico, but if you're looking generally at the state of Mexico in, say, the 19th century, they were still using if you will, medieval or pre-industrial or whatever farming techniques, and much of at least the good productive land was owned by big land lords. So land and or your wealth was determined by, one, how much land that you could physically farm, you know, because if you have something 5 times as big as what you can farm and you have no money to hire anybody else, it doesn't matter. You can only farm so much. You know, if you're I'm talking about almost no animal power to do plowing. It's just, you know, plowing with your own, you know, your own muscle power. And so if somebody else is owning the land and or taking, you know, a portion of the crops that you grow because you are in essence a type of serf on the land, it looks like it's a finite situation, and that somebody has more is denying you something. And this is why communism in Latin America has been so popular, because they often keep the economies a finite thing. I do know, like in, I think it was Nicaragua or something, one person, you know, had the license to import, I don't know, automobiles or something like this, so that no one else could go to some other company in some other country and go, hey, I'll import Hondas, you know, let me just buy 10 Hondas from, you know, the Japanese factory and bring them in. No, because the government had given a friend the license to import trucks or automobiles, or, you know, a class of imports, and he was the only person that was allowed to import automobiles, and then he could sell them at whatever he wants to sell them for. Obviously, he wants to be able to sell them, so he doesn't want to price them. He has to price them over the cost of getting them there, but because he wants to make some money. But he has to price. He can't, if he prices them too high, he can't sell any. You know, so he's got to find, you know, for the limited amount of people at the time, you know, in Nicaragua, to sell some automobiles to, because not everybody, the peasants, couldn't afford them in the first place, because, you know, even at his cost of getting them, couldn't afford them. And you don't want to just sell 3 of them to the 3 richest people in the country. You want to sell them to the sort of middle class that could sort of kind of afford them. So he's finding a price, but he's going to get the best price he can and not have the competition from somebody coming in with a cheaper car from another country that's only half as much, because it was limited. So this is why, and this is how a lot of Latin America, not saying all of it, I didn't take a Latin American studies as a primary choice when I was looking at political science, but the political science department head, which I sort of liked, obviously a leftist, do I have to specify that, and we got along fairly well. I had a bunch of classes with him, including, because he was teaching them Latin American, and he was a Latin American studies professor for political science. So this is why, and I'm sure that, you know, the way it was for, I don't know, Nicaragua, it was not the way it was for Ecuador or something. You know, it changes from country to country, but talking about it in generalities. And so because economies were kept to a finite situation, Marxism, socialism, had a greater appeal on it, because it was a limited size pie, and the pie wasn't allowed to get bigger. And so you couldn't have just startups without a license from the government. And that's an important thing. And yes, I know I've gone on too long about this, but would you want me to go on about socialism and Marxism all the time? And see, we haven't even played yet, and I hadn't intended to do this. So let's get back to playing. Okay, and I'm sending out some replacement, which I think maybe still on the move. Tags, I don't know, maybe they've made it to Hawaii. I'm also sending out, I've decided to send out the DEs that I've made and use them to replace the DDs that have been using as escorts for my liners and such, and then shift the DDs into fleet organizations. Now, on a recent video, maybe even the last one, sorry, one of the viewers asked, he's playing a British campaign and posted his current ship types and numbers, and was asking for advice on fleet composition. And I posted a little bit back, and I've been sort of helped a little bit here. This is an important number to where to look. I've been informed on this. If this goes to red, like we can see here, and the higher the number, is a penalty for having more capital ships than, or not even just more, because maybe you need more screens than capitals to have a proper balance between that. And that's something to look at. I have been informed, and you can. And I've been warned that although I like them and I'm not giving up, obviously I'm not giving up the ones I already have, but I still like the ideas of pocket battleships. And though their sort of problem is, the reason we had a high loss rates in the battle down here was because they're fast, and so they rush into combat in the current system unsupported, is what I gather is what they've done, what they're doing. Okay, have they made it here? Yes, they made it here. Okay. Yes, you come out to the ocean, because I want to make sure I move to carrier and move to the right location. The right one. Okay. Oh, you're not there. You're not there yet, but you're coming. Okay, so it's still okay. They're still coming. Yeah. Okay, we've lost that because of this. They're moving to there. Fine. These guys can move to there. That's sort of at least the plan with all of our. Well, you got a little bit of support, and it's a pretty light unit, so you can get in there and support that attack. Okay, and medium fuel tank. So that's sort of, as I look at it, some of the dangers of me playing the Soviet Union, that I am going to feel compelled to go on and on and on about socialism. Because, and again, and I say this because I know we have new people coming here, I am fascinated by National Socialism or Nazism. I think it's a hateful ideology, but I am fascinated by it on several levels. One is just how you can go from nothing, though I've learned that there are some precursors to it, but almost nearly nothing to, you know, there is no National Socialist Party. There are some various rabid right-wing elements, though some of those, at least through most of the rising to power, are rejecting Nazism. Some of them aren't. But you go from basically nothing in 1920 in 1933 you've taken over Germany, and in that short 13-year time period, to me that fascinates me. Marxism had been around for some time, and you had other elements to it there, and so the whole Nazi thing fascinates me in it. And I also, can we get close enough to an army group here that, yeah, good, okay, we connected to that, great, which connects us to the greater theaters. I'm also, I have a collector's mentality. I like to deal with things, so I like to deal with the minutia of collecting. And so just on the uniforms and all the and if you've looked at Third Reich events, and I go into some of this there in a very light thing, but you can tell it from the pictures, you know, the minutia of German army and the greater Nazi party, minutia of uniform collecting, and I've known personally some and interacted, you know, on the idea of online with some people. One guy who who's a massive SS uniform collector. He is a university professor of some sort, but he doesn't state who his name is, and he doesn't, you know, where he works or anything like that online, and because he is very much not a Nazi, and is probably as left as most university professors, I presume, in political, in actual political views. But he is, oh, that's the closest leadership. Okay, well, I don't know where we should move you to, but maybe we should move you guys up. And so he is worried that if it gets out, the people wouldn't understand that it's just a collection fascination and no zero political agreement with or admiring for what the Nazis did. And if you look at his post, you can tell that he very much hates what the Nazis did. And so I know this to be, well, here you connected down to where? Okay, your headquarters is going off to there for other invasions, yes. And you're having a supply or fuel problem getting there, maybe, I don't know. Because Vichy France isn't set up that well. Okay. And so, you know, I'm just, that you can have, no, I don't want to move there, I want to support the attack there. You can have an interest in Nazi uniforms very much. And a lot of the interest that started with the Nazi uniforms were veterans and the sons of veterans who fought against them. You know, it's not a, the mere fact that somebody has some big super collection of Nazi stuff doesn't mean that they're at all in sympathy with any of the political ideas, or trying to glorify them in any way, shape, or form. And so I know this to be true, and so I have some of these sort of fascinations with them. So this is why I'm drawn to study and talk about Nazism, not in its my wish to promote it. And if you look at the body of work, I'm really slamming it pretty damn hard. But I just don't have that similar fascination for communism. And I hate it just as much, so it just, you know, it comes out as sort of a hate fest if I do it. That's sort of why I am not planning. That doesn't mean I'm not going to, it just means I'm not planning currently to do a Soviet series. That's not that's very much far from a no. That's just, it's not on the current plans. Because after playing the US, then we're going to go back to Germany. And then where, I don't know. That's as far as I've gotten on the plans. There's an I don't know. Beyond. beyond that. Division HQs, okay. That does help some things. And we're going to let that continue, yay. Good. Okay, you're... There we are. You come back to here, rebase to carrier, yes. Okay, now we have these guys, the Kaga and the Akagi, back to full CAGs. And let's move you up to here. They have no CAGs. Let's add one CAG at least. I have a second one here, but I want to see if there's another. Okay, those are okay. See, that's down to 1, and that's at 2, and that's at 2. I think. Yeah. Okay. You come ashore. Rebase. Now they at least have a CAG going with the Musashi and other battleships. And yes, I know that is a battleship heavy unit. Okay, you want to end up with 22? Okay, I wanted a 2 CAG unit to come and add to the Shokaku group. That'll now be up to full strength. Need to get organized up, but it'll be functionally at full strength. Oh yeah, Watanabe's pretty good. Okay, so now that, at least in CAGs, is up to full strength. So all of the carrier groups here, this is full strength with CAGs. This is half strength, but at least it has a CAG. Even it's set up to be maybe a battle. It's just so that we have some air support. Okay, and that's at full strength now for what it can be. Okay, 159. What I want to see here is 159%. No, it's not that one, it's this one. R. Let's see if we add this here. See, it goes up to 185%. Nick, I think it was that we were talking to. I don't think light cruisers count as escorts. Unit ratio here. I don't know what the overview. Oh well, let's. Okay, so they are. What do we have? And okay, I'm looking over here. So we have that. What do we have 0 of? Huh. What do we have the 0 of? Let me try to figure this out. Sorry, yeah, we don't have any. Okay. What this is. Let's come. I know there's a green one down here somewhere. Well, Okay, I don't know why that appears to be getting worse, but I don't understand it. I don't know what the zero value is. That subs maybe. What do you want? Just no, we're not doing metal from you. Sorry. I don't know what that is, but I am not the naval warfare person expert to in any way be the you know what to do. Well, I'm winging it. I'm doing okay, I think. And I, you know, sort of kind of know what historically things happen, but in sort of game terms, others can do better. And so if you want to look, I think it was yesterday's query that was being made. Oh, flying boats. We need to come here and then fly to Sri Lanka. Yeah, hopefully we can do it without any damage and just come down to here. So I've got a group that you want to join. And so on. Sorry, as I'm sitting here, sometimes I forget who's posted what. Yeah, I think we'll head to Bombay instead of going after him. Okay, you've got here, you're pushing there. Yeah, you push here too. You can, because they're coming across the river and fighting 2 units, you can support them. Hopefully that will help. Okay, home front focus. Which is all good, but the manpower shortage, which is appropriate. But, yeah, I think we can afford the manpower loss. Continuing and continue to do it. Like I say, the rest, beyond the manpower, it's all good. Okay, yeah. Okay, guys. Okay, yeah. Let's get you out of here. You're straining this. Well, they're all straining the supply system, but rebase to there. Well, if we take that out, we could supply that. But before you start to lose organization levels, or you already have. No, okay, good. Before you start to lose organization levels and supply, let's invade over here. If we get the port, we can supply it. Okay, you attack there with their support. You support that attack? Oh, you're still defending. Attack back here to sort of break out, so we're gonna hold that river line with that light infantry unit from Thailand. I think that's where that one comes from. And you can support that attack up there. Yeah, good, because we can get a go. Oh, we did send, I think. Yes, okay. Yeah, okay, you can actually just sit there for a while, but you guys Get on board the boat and the garrison troop. Yeah, you're just a little too shattered. Well, come down here. You'll get there fairly quick. Rebase. Hopefully this invasion will work out well enough. Then we can start supplying into there. We don't have... Oh, do we have Tanganyika installed? We may. That may turn over to be Germany. I don't know. We'll see. When we liberate it, we'll see. And also I'll comment on, oh, I don't even want to try to pronounce your name because I'd have to look at it, but it starts with a P. I remember who you are, and I don't know if you specified what country you're from, but I know I do believe you're somewhere in Asia. Talked about social inequality with wealth, and they sort of have a inverse situation than where we do social bullying and other things by the wealthy of the poor. Where in America, we more have social bullying by the poor, or physical bullying maybe, but it's sort of socially based, by the poor on the wealthy in America. So, conditions in other countries, and I will completely, because I often talk about your country, whoever you are, I do often talk about your country. Could be Germany, because I know I have lots of German viewers. Or talking about Britain, and you're British, and a high IKB, and patriotic Britain, and probably a few others that I'm forgetting, that are at least routine posters that I interact with. And so I don't know your country as well as you do, and I don't claim to. But I'm definitely aware that I'm looking at it through American eyes. And I really like talking to my friend Azads, who I often think is wrong about things, okay? But I really like talking to him, and it's not that I learn more about my country from talking to him, but I learn how non-Westerners view my country, America, as well as the West in general, from some of his comments. So it gives me a different viewpoint, and it's not a wrong viewpoint in the sense of how it looks from outside, and from that viewpoint I do think it is a reasonably correct view from that perspective of, you know, how the country looks. Not doesn't mean that in any way that how it is. And like I was saying earlier, I believe the U.S. could feed the world, and often when we do try to feed parts of the world, we do a bunch of immediate good, meaning getting food to people that need it, but we also do bad in that we destroy their local food infrastructure, because it puts all the farmers out of work. And then people that did have a livelihood and means to feed themselves no longer do, so they're now dependent upon the food aid. And so I'm coming more and more to the conclusion, and I know a lot of governments, you stop, you go there, you come here, and see if you can attack across the river. Governments like to get aid to the government, but, and this is also coming up with Central America, all the, you know, the invaders that are trying to invade the United States, not with guns, but just bodies coming into the United States, claim that the U.S. should, you know, fix our countries for us, blah, 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 and they also want to go back because you damaged them in the first place. I'm disagreeing that we damaged them in the first place. Oh, but the United Fruit Company, or whatever it was, did, yeah, but you let them do it. You know, if you had your shit together way back whenever, you wouldn't have let them to do that. So, you know, it's like, oh yeah, we don't believe in having law enforcement. Everybody, law enforcement is evil and oppressive. And then a biker gang shows up in your town and goes, yeah. Well, why didn't you have law enforcement kick them out? Now, yeah, the biker gang did something bad. Oh, and the United Fruit Company or something very well may have done something bad, but that isn't America's fault, okay? America isn't responsible for every American corporation that does something in the world, okay? If an American tourist goes to some country and runs over a local, it isn't America's fault that the tourist was driving drunk in a car in another country and kills somebody in the country. It is that person's fault. It isn't America's fault, okay? So if an American company comes and does something bad in a country, and maybe do it for generations, it isn't America's fault. It's those that did its fault if they did something bad. Now, maybe it was bad, but maybe it was less bad than what would have happened otherwise. I don't know, and we'd have to look at the United Fruit Company or whatever, the getting bananas and pineapples and whatnot. That versus what would have likely been somewhere else. And if you want to look at the U.S. taking out Mossadegh in Iran, oh, that was a bad action by the CIA. I don't know. Because I do know that the people that took him out feared that it was going to allow in Soviet influence and allow, the greater spread of Soviet power, and whether this was going to become a Soviet Socialist Republic integrated into the Soviet Union, or become sort of a communist puppet state like the Warsaw Pact or something, or North Korea or whatever. That's what they feared was going to happen. Okay. Now, that may have not what was going to happen. And I do like what ifs in history, but we don't know what would have happened. And they, like I say, it might have been a paradise, but I don't think it was. So the U.S. intervened into Iran to take him out and make sure the Shah is in power. I don't know that that was a bad thing. It may have been, if we had multiple timelines to look at and, time machines to go back and change it back and forth. Maybe we would find out what the CIA did in taking out the popular government of Mossadegh in Iran would have been a good thing. Had they been in their power. And now a lot of people that talk about this are sort of socialist lefties who want socialist lefty government and who will believe socialist lefty government is always better than whatever the alternative is. And they are also caught up in the East-West conflict and propaganda of, again, the East-West conflict between the Western world and the Soviet Union. So they're buying into that the CIA killing Mossadegh is a bad thing. Now, I do agree that the CIA should not be running around killing foreign leaders without presidential approval. That's actually, the CIA can go off any leader in the world that perfectly legal to do so in the United States, to go kill any leader in the world, so long as the President of the United States, and it can be classified and it can be secret, signs off on it. So did Obama sign off on killing of Gaddafi, or was Gaddafi's killing just a local matter? I think it was probably a local matter, but because he was sort of butchered and whatnot, trying to escape. But it is legal, but it is not legal anymore in the United States for the CIA to do it without a presidential finding or whatever it's called. People often, either Americans or foreigners often mistake that, because they did change the law saying that you need to have presidential approval. And those that want to keep the U.S. from taking out foreign leaders often cite it. They're no longer allowed to do that, and often leave off without the president's approval, because they can do it with the president's approval. So yeah, the U.S. does mess in foreign countries, and sometimes it works out great. Hi, Japan. Think you liked our rule there, don't you? And You know, don't you think MacArthur did a good job, Japan? Yeah, I'm sure some ultranationalists will go, oh no, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay. But really? Yeah, you probably really secretly do think MacArthur was a good shogun for Japan, because that's in essence what he sort of was. Still had the emperor there, but it was MacArthur in charge, and he and his staff, probably more of his staff, but he did oversee it, reorganized Japan, and it seems to be doing like a pretty good country going on. Hi, South Korea. And compare that to North Korea. That's one of my favorites, because we can look at the Philippines are still a bit messed up, and the U.S. did rule there for a while. You know, okay. Problems of one, when the U.S. took over, we took over from Spain. Spain had hundreds of years of damage to the Philippines culturally, Spanish culture. Hi Spaniards, hi Latin Americans who have that tradition. There's some serious flaws in your culture, I'm sorry. And one of them is the acceptance of corruption. And I know I have a fair number of viewers which Portuguese culture is very similar to Spanish culture. And I know I do have a fair number of Brazilian viewers, and I'm actually sort of surprised at how many Brazilian viewers for such a small channel I have. Now, it's probably only like 5 or 10 of you, but it's still a fair number. And a few of you I have been corresponding with at different times. You know, on the messages below and whatnot is what I'm referring to. You know, talking about, I know they have a new sort of controversial president who's supposedly to get rid of the corruption in the Brazilian government. But generally speaking, and we can look at this as a an observable fact, whether you like it or not, that there are much higher levels of corruption in governments there than is acceptable, shall we say, in the general Anglo sphere, you know, Canada, Australia, US. Not that there isn't corruption. You can look at the city of Chicago in the United States, or now the former French colony of Louisiana, which does influence that. Lots of corruption down there. So yes, we do have corruption, but we don't accept it to the level. And it's, you know, I'm not like, when I'm talking about the culture, I'm not complaining about the food or the music or you know, marriage practices or something like that. I'm sort of talking about governmental corruption and the culture that sort of allows it. And also, I'm also looking at various sociological hierarchical societies that definitely come out of Spain. And I know that there's a lot of Spanish who are levelers, which levelers predates communists. But they wanted to level society, you know, level it as in everyone being equal. But we see a much more sociologically rigid aristocracy and, you know, social settings at different levels than we do, say, in Britain. There was a much greater movement up and down. Elite families over the generations going down, you know, that were losing, you know, that weren't succeeding well, so they were losing their in that family losing power. Other families on the rise over generations. We see a much more fluid system, and so this aristocratic system of Spain gets transferred to its colonies, and there's no way around it. It just does. The culture gets transmitted. So the cultures in Latin America are still feeling that. And that is part, in my opinion, part of the situation in the Philippines. Back to the Philippines. And so, yeah, I'm blaming Spanish culture for that. And like I say, I'm a culturalist. I judge large groups of people on their culture, not on their race. And all cultures are not equal. There are problems with my culture. Some I may think are good and you think are bad. You know, we can disagree about what is good and bad. Poke, oh boy, I don't want to even try to butcher your name. You know, has talked about the Confucian, and which was talking about this part of the world, not so much down here, because this isn't influenced by. The Philippines, Indonesia, and whatnot are not influenced, to my understanding, by any substantial amount of Confucianism. But Japan, Korea, China, Vietnam, I think, is influenced by the sort of Confucian sphere, or whatever. And that is an element to all of this. And as part of the lack of that is an element in the Philippines, but also dealing with the taking over from Spain, the U.S. did. I really think U.S. direct rule should have lasted much longer, and because it didn't, we moved into supporting supporters which were often corrupt in the Philippines. But so we look at Japan, and we did very well there. And so I love Korea in that basically my understanding, and maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, prior to and during the Japanese occupation of Korea, more or less Korean culture in this is all the same. They are essence the same people. And so you get the dividing only post-Japanese rule, in which you have the dividing of the country between Soviet occupation and American occupation, and then the Korean War, and then creating of North and South Korea. So now you have two Koreas, and in fact I do believe you have two Korean cultures. They both speak Korean, they both have the same roots, but they are now different cultures. So it's a very good comparative between a socialist-based, and it's a very tyrannical socialist-based rule, compared to, say, Yugoslavia, which was, for a socialist communist government, it was sort of a lighter touch, is my understanding. You know, I think the heaviest probably was Cambodia, but in sort of some of the European countries, sort of the heaviest Stalinisticist whatever was Albania, and which is part of the reason why Albania is such a shithole today. And they're going to take generations digging out of it. You know, however much of it, it's the inherent culture. I'm sure that's an element that plays into it. But it is, you know, because you look at King Zog's time and whatever, the country isn't much of a country back then either. I'm sorry if we have any viewers from Albania. That is my feelings, and if they hurt, I'm sorry. I don't mean to hurt you. I'm just, you know, as facts, not feelings, is the way I'm viewing it. And I can be entirely wrong, but it's my views, and I have them. And so, my views are the facts. So I love looking at Korea to examine, American rule and governance over South Korea, I think worked out pretty damn well. And so, yeah, you're working with sort of the Confucian-based cultural system with an overlay of Americanism, that you get South Korea. And I don't expect South Korea or Japan to become America, but they are both heavily influenced by America. And that, I think, is a reality that is important to understand and look at. And is how I get some of my views. You can support that attack now, but there we go. How are we doing here? Okay, we're doing fine. They're doing okay. They're just a small police force. Okay, guys, you come along here to support this. Advance. What's the terrain like? See, I would prefer to move you rapidly through here, then go through the mountains. Even though we're not fighting anybody, I don't think there's any particular resources to get. So speed and gobbling up territory is more important than simply, you know, taking particular bits of territory, but that, like, is useful to deny it to the enemy and give it to us. So we want to move with our speed. You're moving super damn slow because you don't have any damn fuel. Okay, well, keep going. Get to where you need to be. And oh good, we are ashore here. Okay, well, once you get organized, is there any sort of fleet to take out? Escaping, I guess not. Or not much of one. Get organized and then we'll push in a little bit, but we'll also see about taking out that port. Next. I was thinking, looking. Oh, yeah, stop attack. No, just stop attacking. And we also sent out something else had come to my mind that I wanted to address. Oh, here. That was at least one of the things. Get on board. Get on board. Yeah, come down to here where we have rebase. Where we have supplies. Yes, I do intend to play the game. Sorry if I talk too much. I know some of you, most of you... Well, what I want the channel to be is me commenting about history and society and politics and whatever, but I also want it to be gameplay as well. It is not meant to be... Good, we're taking out more. Just me pontificating on about things. We would give them money for exchange for metal. Okay, we'll try that, Chile. Don't know that we're having much. Let's check that. Interference from our deals with Chile. No, we're not. Chile did enter the World War II. Brazil did. They were joking in the multiplayer that, ooh, now Brazil's in the war. You know, they're gonna do, big things. Well, Brazil, of all the Latin American countries, is the country that, in my opinion, most got active in World War II. Sent a really sort of kick-ass military unit. I don't know if it was quite a division, but it was multiple battalions, and they did really well in Italy, fighting. A few of them died sort of very heroic in sort of heroic last stands in sort of French Foreign Legion tradition, and the idea that they got sort of cut off and surrounded and fought to the death and fought very valiantly. Where like Mexico joined, and I don't know how much Mexico attributed or contributed to the war effort, maybe greatly in resources and whatever else, but I don't really think in any real... Oh, and there were a lot of Mexican volunteers in American armed forces coming in there. Most Mexican Americans in California, I'm specifying that, are people that came from Mexico to California after California was a state in the United States. I think the Anglo community, which was rather small, was almost the same size as the Mexican community when California declares its independence. There are very, very small Mexican population here. Much larger Indian population at the time. But very small Mexican population, because you realize Mexico City is down here. California was just some sort of wildlands that were, had a few smallish towns, and Monterey, which is, there's Carmel, Monterey is right in here. I think was maybe the capital. But Monterey was a big city. Monterey, and San Francisco was there, but was nothing until the gold rush. And so, San Bernardino was another sort of city which was sort of nothing in Los Angeles, which becomes, what you think. But these were all small, little places. It was a thing. So most Mexican Americans come in sort of in the 20th century. Many of them legally, many of them not legally, but many of them legally. So all the propaganda that we didn't cross the border crossed us. No, no, no. 90+% of the Mexican Americans that are resident in California are descended from Mexicans who moved north afterwards. Now that may be very different, and I don't know the percentages of, say, Mexicans in Texas. That's a different thing. And figure that's, 1,000 miles or whatever. Well, maybe not so much from this tip to here, but, that's a significantly different settlement pattern. So being specific, because I do know California better than I know Texas. Stuff. So yeah, and so Mexico may have contributed a fair amount. Oh, good, another destroyer flotilla. In that sort of manner to the war, but Mexico, as in the Mexican Army or Mexican Air Force or Mexican whatever, contributes extremely little to the war effort. Again, industrially, I don't know right offhand. Militarily, or volunteers in American forces, and you could look at this. Ricardo Montalban, Fantasy Island, The Wrath of Khan, where he plays Khan, both back in the original Star Trek series and then the later movie. So him, if you're at all a Star Trek geek, you know who I'm talking about, Ricardo Montalban. One, if not his first, probably, but one of his biggest first roles was in Battleground. Great movie on the Battle of the Bulge, starring Van Johnson and others. Of a group of American looking at basically a squad, platoon, squad, more of a squad, but out of a platoon of American paratroopers in the Battle of the Bulge. And so, and he plays a Mexican American from Los Angeles who never seen snow before, and he's fascinating. Oh yeah, I see it up on the mountains, which you can see from most of LA. Mount Baldy, called that because there's a bit of snow up on top of there most of the year, so it's sort of bald looking. That we do have snow up there, but we are well, I don't want to get you too far. I wanted to move you more south, but I want to keep you in communication range, and we'll move you north this way. Plays that and represents that, and there was a fair amount of, and there he's playing a Mexican American, not a Mexican immigrant, but there was a fair amount of Mexican immigration. And again, at the time, we wanted Mexican immigration because they came in and worked in war factories. And I am not against either permanent or temporary Mexican immigration into the United States. I just want the United States to control it. And so if we say seasonal, like 3 months out of the year when we want a bunch of farm workers to, pick the crops, fine. We let them in. They come in, they do their seasonal work, they go home. They know it. If they don't want the work, they don't have to come. We do that. If we want more immigrants to come in here, fine. We determine the number. Now, I may want a small number, and some Democrat who wants more Mexican voters that he thinks that'll vote Democrat wants massive amounts of Mexicans in. We may disagree, but I at least want it to be the Americans' decision, not, whoever just feels like it gets to come across the border. So I just want it to be an American decision. Now, of course, I'll have my opinions on what the numbers should be depending upon the needs of America, not the needs of Mexico, not the needs of Latin America, not the needs of Chinese people who get into Mexico and then who want to sneak across the border, or some other group of peoples. And there are a fair number of peoples that can't get visas into the United States, that do get visas into Mexico, and then sneak across the border, and they're not all dark-skinned, so it's not a skin color thing, at least not from my perspective. And again, I'm a Californian, so I am used to many skin colors as being a natural and normal and expected thing. So it is not about skin color, it is about culture. Okay, amphibious light armor. That is here, and we're going to stop that. Ski brigade. Not that we couldn't possibly use one, but in Japan, I don't know if, well, definitely had mountain type troops. I don't think it had ski brigades. Obviously, Japan has a fair amount of snow, especially in the north. So that would be something that would be quite possible, but I just don't think... Oh, that reminds me, that's one thing. I think I have some long-range submarines to send out on patrol. That was the thing I was actually looking for, now that I remember. Looking at damage. Okay, so we're going to come back here and do user damage control systems. And since I just remembered, yes, I think we will have here, yeah. This is the first LSS. Okay, well. Okay, there we go. Convoy rating passive. So if you start taking some hits, come home. I don't want to have to micromanage you in that way. Well, Port Moresby's been a real fight. Okay, okay, you're sort of, yeah, okay. Holding out there. We've got some garrison forces holding there, that's good. Well, we've won, but they're moving, shifting forces back into Port Moresby to try to hold it. Because once we take that, like we just did, and I just noticed we could have had some ships off there that would have helped us. But once we take it, like we did, they're going to lose all supplies, and if we can hold it, this force is doomed. Well, we're going to end this here. I want to thank you so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. You can, of course, comment on any topics below. Also love to have you subscribe here for more controversial talk while playing historical games. See you next time, my friends.